Up next, we've got Jonathan Wise. He's co-founder of the Comms Lab. He originally started out as a planner working in top ad agencies, but after 15 years doing that, he realised that pushing products without any thought for the environment was not how he wanted to pay the bills anymore. So after heading back and getting a degree in sustainability, he set up the Comms Lab to bridge the gap between agency, the client, and the world we live in today. So please welcome Jonathan.
So I'm going to, rather than kind of give you answers, I'm going to leave you with some questions. So what are we here to do? Right, that's quite a big kind of question. How do we want to spend our time? What are we in service of? And in the context of this presentation, what are the problems that we are using our kind of strategic, creative design skills and talent to try and fix? Does anybody ever sort of think about that? And I think there's a quote from the wonderful Mary Oliver, who's an American poet, which is something that I've been kind of thinking about in the journey I've been on. Tell me, what is it you want to do with your one wild and precious life? Which I think is a wonderful, wonderful question to be thinking about. So why did I get to sort of stand here with you and ask questions like that? And I was a planner, trained as a planner. I worked for most of my career at JWT, where I started, working on brands such as Shell. So how do we encourage people to buy more petrol? Vodka, Diageo, how do we get people to buy more vodka? That was pretty fun. And then Nestle, including Kit Kat, how do we get people to buy more chocolate? And the job of a planner, as I would understand it, is to work out how we say and communicate about a brand such that people are more disposed and encouraged to buy more of our brand or to justify a price premium over buying own label or others. And I did that for a few years, and then I went and worked at UKTV, where I was fortunate enough to join when David Abraham just started UKTV as the CEO, who's now running Channel 4, and work on a Dave rebrand, which was a really wonderful experience. And out of that experience, co-wrote an IPA case-winning paper that won the gold, which was. And I tell you that because in I don't know if you know about the IPA Effectiveness Awards, but it's basically you need to prove return on marketing investment. So we spent this amount of money in terms of the branding and the design, and on the media, and then we accrued this amount of profit growth as a consequence. And so it's all about kind of making money and driving growth for the client, and then in terms of selling more stuff. And I was like, well, is that cool? Is that okay? And then also, I was also having a kind of like not an existential crisis then. I was kind of like reaching in my mid-30s, and I looked around me, and I sort of thought, is there anybody around me who's like over the age of 40? I don't know if there's what it's like at Rufus Leonard, but there's not that many people who are still around when they're 40 in the agency I was at. And I had got no desire to be head of department. I got no desire to kind of like run my own agency. And so I sort of thought, rather than me getting moved out on the next economic cycle, I thought I'd better go and retrain and work out what I wanted to do with the second part of my career. Because I was too proud to face the possibility of redundancy, as I'd seen many times at JWT. And so what I did is I went back, as been told, and I went and did a master's in sustainability up at Ashridge Business School. It's the one that had been set up by Anita Roddick, the very famous Anita Roddick, and it was a wonderful experience. And the thing that really stuck with me was this. So in the Western Europe and the UK, we use resources at such a rate it would take 3 planets for it to naturally replenish itself. Okay, so we chew through enough stuff in the things that we buy and the things that we consume, such that we would need 3 planets. We're kind of eating into the capital, if you want to think about it in terms of finance. And we take our lead from a consumerist model, I would assume, from the States. And in the States, they chew through resources at such a rate that we would need 5 planets for it to naturally replenish itself. And we ain't got 5 planets. And so it's only a matter of time, if we carry on at that rate, that we're going to run out of resources, right? It's kind of simple kind of math, right? And so the kind of the link in terms of consumption was basically to produce all that stuff, it takes energy to make it, it takes energy to kind of like deliver it, and it takes energy to consume it, and it takes energy to dispose of it. And the link then is clearly, if you're aware of your climate change, the energy takes, at the present, carbon dioxide to burn, and then in the burning of it, and there's plenty of charts I can show you, is the rise to the surface temperature. We're currently at 1 degree warmer in our atmosphere, and if you know anything about climate change, if we get to 2 degrees, then that makes the kind of the weather patterns and the environments that we live within and potentially very unstable, and it, the Iceland, the ice sheets melted, all that kind of stuff, right? It's like, it's not cool, right? If that happens, it's not cool. And it's like, well, what does that mean for me? How did I kind of make sense of that? And it was really fascinating that we had a speaker come in and give us a little model. So I felt I was doing quite well. So I was kind of like, this planner working in this agency, earning an okay amount of money, winning awards and all that kind of like, feedback loops for success. And I was helping the we, right? So I was helping kind of like the clients grow, the agency grow, Britain as a kind of creative hub, alongside Vivienne Westwood and design and the legacy of Trevor and all that kind of stuff. But in doing so, I came to understand that whilst the I and the we were doing well, it was having a negative effect on the planet. And basically, if there ain't no planet, then there ain't no I and there ain't no we. That's not great. So what do you do if you acknowledge that? Anybody got any thoughts? If you accept, this is the bit where you're quite low, hopefully, right? There's something about sitting in there. What would you do? What did I do if you acknowledge that? Do something, yeah. What else? Or you can kind of look for solutions, look for problems. And so what you kind of do is you kind of go, okay, so the answer, my first response is it's about population. We just need less people. Which is good. We're at 7 billion people, we just need less people. So there's some ethical issues around that, encouraging people to have less people. And then also, if you think about it, the people that are coming on to take us from 7 to 9 billion, mainly live in Africa and Southeast Asia, and the average carbon footprint of those people is the same as 2 dogs in your house, right? Their carbon footprint is incredibly low because they just don't use that much energy. So the other answer, it's like, so I'm like, it's not my problem. We just have to sort of, have less people. The second thing is technology is going to save the day, right? And maybe Google will kind of see us through. Maybe it will be solar. Maybe it will be renewables. That technology has been in existence for many years, and it hasn't happened yet. And certainly, the more important point, I think, is the fact that the built environment and the capacity that exists in the world at the moment, because of the infrastructure that's been built and the investment into that, i.e., 747s last for 30 years, buildings last for a long time, cars and coal-fired power stations are there and built and financed for that amount of time, means that our ability to kind of like turn around from a tech point of view is pretty challenging. So the only card that seems to have left to play for me is about stuff, right? It's like if we were to believe in equality and we were all to live on this planet equally, then our 3 planets' use of resources is going to have to get down to 1. I mean, that's kind of kids' maths, as I would say it. So what happens if you acknowledge that responsibility? So you've kind of got to move from head, it's not me, and it's, let's solve it, and I use a creative solve it. What happens? Any thoughts about that?
Sell your house.
Live on higher ground, yeah. So there's a story about that. So I cried, right? There's this thing that happened. It was pretty extraordinary. For me, it was like, you just kind of like let it sit. You let this thing sit and you acknowledge that one, for me, was responsible for seeing the kind of like the emerging kind of weather volatility, and you kind of look forward into the future about what is going to happen if we do not course correct. And that is quite a life-changing moment, and is something which, from a sort of theory point of view, I think, we need to kind of like accept and acknowledge. And I think that what we do out of that in terms of act, it's like, what can you do? How can you kind of creatively solve your way out of this? So we published a report. It's the Comms Lab. So the Comms Lab exists to kind of maximize the positive contribution of advertising and design. And it's basically about, is it possible for agencies to kind of move to be more purpose-led? Is it possible for them, rather just to consider their output to further the growth of the companies they serve, is it possible for agencies to think more about the positive contribution they can make to the world? So if Unilever is claiming that they want to make sustainable living commonplace, right, so they've got a mission beyond profit and growth, what would be the equivalent for Rufus Leonard? What would be the equivalent for D&AD? What would be the equivalent for WPP? Is it possible for them to think about, you know, can we work in a way that is, we're producing content and we're working with clients such that we're creating a world fit for our children and grandchildren? Is that even possible? And that is a moonshot kind of level question. That's a complete transformation in the way that the industry thinks, rather than about profit and growth and getting people to buy more stuff, and thinking about how they can just deploy their creative talents for the benefit of future generations. And I have no idea whether that's possible, but just putting the question in the room seems important. And we run a night called Beers for Good, and it's like, people are in this question already, right? I think we're at the front of the curve. I mean, I call this the kind of the next wave of disruption. So we've kind of gone through globalization and digital, and I think we're at purpose. So this is, we get a load of people together from advertising and design to sort of think about what they want to do, and this is a kind of typical quote. People are like in the early stage of confusion, and it's a question of like, how will this play out? And I think there's something really interesting in, I think this is less about fixing. Buckminster Fuller, do you know the guy? He talks about like your hand is about pattern integrity. It's like, you know, 30 years ago, this didn't exist, and in 30, 40 years, this isn't going to exist, right? It forms into something solid, and then it dissolves. And it's like, you know, the industry, it formed into what it is, and rather than trying to fix something, is it possible for it to creatively unfold based on the changing understanding of the context into something else? Is that possible? You know, this is an evolving, this is a, you know, the Rufus Leonard, the industry is a being, it's a species, and can it evolve into something else? So the moonshot question could be, can we creatively, consciously evolve to live within the planetary boundaries rather than exceed them? I'll leave you with that. Thank you.